we can go ahead and get started as people continue to join. So hi everyone, welcome in. My name is Sarah Jones. I'm a program coordinator here with Virginia Clean Cities. And today we will be hearing from Robbie Astrop and CJ Berg with Shell Recharge Solutions, formerly known as Green Lots. Today they're going to talk about the charging infrastructure that they have going. And CJ is going to give us a little bit of information on planning for charging infrastructure, which I'm very excited to hear about. And today we're expecting a little bit larger crowd than normal. So instead of doing our regular go around the room where I call out everyone's name, I'd like to invite everyone to use the chat box to put your name, where you're coming from, maybe your location, and any other information that you might like to share, like if you want to drop your contact information in there, because we also want this to be a good place for networking. So I'll invite you all to do that. I'll also just flag here that for those of you who have not attended the Technology Happy Hour with us before, we like to make these places for discussion. So during the event at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting, you can also put them in the chat box and we will address them at the end of the session. But we encourage conversation and discussion. So thank you all for being here today. And with that, I would like to invite Robbie and CJ. You guys can go ahead and bring up your presentation now and go ahead and get us started with a little bit of introduction about yourselves.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So hi, everyone. My name is Robbie Astrop, based out of Midlothian, Virginia, just southwest of Richmond. Excited to be here today. Been engaging with the Clean Cities group over the last 3-4 months about presenting to the group here, and we are excited to be engaged with them and a contributor to enable electrification across the state of Virginia. And so what we'll focus on today, we don't want to have death by PowerPoint. Our main priority in getting through this information will be to provide some context around who we are commercially, from a commercial point of view, context around our solutions, and talk a little bit about open standards and OCPP, which we advocate for across the industry. We'll also touch on available hardware options. As a market supplier, we actually aren't a manufacturer of hardware, but bring a variety of hardware options to market to support our customers. And then CJ's in our infrastructure solutions group, and we'll talk through budgetary costing and project considerations that we feel would be valuable for anyone to consider when you're thinking about electric vehicle equipment and deploying projects. So a little bit about the both of us. That the guy on top, CJ, I promise he's not a Bond villain. That's CJ is the manager of our construction services group and the infrastructure team, really focused on turnkey deployments. And then myself, I manage sales and business development from Delaware down to South Carolina plus Tennessee for Shell Recharge Solutions. And so commercially, when we think about EV charging as part of the broader Shell group, Shell Recharge Solutions fits into a variety of use cases and applications across the electrical grid. And as part of the broader Shell business, we are looking to bring to market comprehensive solutions that address our customers' decarbonization goals holistically, always under the end goal of enabling electrification and proliferation of electric vehicles and EV charging. A little bit about our history and branding. So originally our organization was founded as Green Lots back in 2008. We're one of the few suppliers within this space that has over a decade of experience. Within that time frame, we've seen a lot of entrants to market, as well as OEMs, hardware suppliers that may enter the market and then exit the market and then actually come back into the market. So a lot of our what we provide to our customers, mitigation of the risk of stranded assets, and longevity and the power of being part of a global organization like Shell, stability. Our headquarters is in Los Angeles, California. Right now, although we're part of the broader Shell organization, our exclusive focus on EV charging encompasses a couple hundred employees in North America. There are about 400 to 500 more in Europe, also exclusively engaged in EV charging. And our primary strategy and the way we've gone to market is primarily in partnering with large utilities, cities, municipalities, OEMs, as well as fleet and retail customers across the United States. And that's a variety of use cases depending upon who we're supporting there. So a little bit about our North American footprint. Should be some familiar names on here for the folks on this call. In the Virginia area, we are working with Dominion Energy in a variety of facets. We are deploying a turnkey project at the Dulles Airport that has 400 kW DC-FC charging stations included in the scope of work. We're also enabling Dominion to deploy some level 2s through its own operate model at its own office in downtown Richmond. We have one site there. And then we also participate in the SCIP program, which I'll give an overview of in a moment. Some of our larger OEM customers, Ford and Penske, we partner with to develop new solutions to bring to market. And they leverage our laboratory in Los Angeles, California, to test use cases and come up with scenarios that we validate before bringing anything to market. Other large customers of ours that I'm sure everyone's familiar with: FedEx, Volvo, UPS. So a little bit about the Dominion SCIP program. It is still open. It sunsets at the end of this year. Still accepting applications for both workplace and transit. The way this program works is essentially we are on a list of approved suppliers, and interested parties can go to the Dominion website, submit an application. You would work with us or another supplier to cost the project or enable you to cost the project, including the infrastructure, software, hardware required to electrify your use case. That submission is processed via Dominion and the administrating partner Guidehouse. And then we would deploy the project, and the customers get reimbursed after we provide proof of invoice. So just to give a high level overview of all the parts of the EVSE deployment that we touch, we can do up to turnkey, which can include site evaluation, specification of hardware with engineering services, engineering, procurement, construction, installation services, all encompassed in our proprietary software platform. And we have newly brought to market a turnkey O&M service, which will guarantee uptime of the EVSEs, which I'll touch on in a moment. Now, a little bit about our platform and the way it was designed on open standards. So just looking at this single line diagram, for those that aren't very familiar with the charging protocols in the market today, the standard protocol is called Open Charge Point Protocol, or OCPP. This protocol, to use an analogy, would be similar to Modbus or like DNP3 from the utility side for either building control or substation equipment that you'll find out on the electrical grid. And the way our system works, so the driver of the vehicle interfaces with our user application, which you can download on your iPhone or Android device today. As a point of note, we have established roaming agreements between Shell Recharge Solutions and a variety of other suppliers in the market, including ChargePoint, EVgo, Flow, so that the driver experience is pretty seamless between all of our different networks. So the driver will utilize their handheld device or smartphone to interact with the station in the field. The station will communicate via OCPP to our backend Sky platform, which is leveraged for both processing transactions, managing assets, as well as data capture. It is a cloud-based solution. And then when this interaction takes place between the driver, the station, and our backend system, a charge is authorized, and the dispenser for power going to vehicle interfaces with the vehicles to execute a charging session. So that's a little bit high level about how the backend solution works and how open standards are leveraged to support these deployments. I did want to talk a little bit about how we validate the various hardware solutions that we bring to market. So what you're seeing here, you may find familiar, it being my background, is our lab location in Los Angeles, California. And what you'll see in this screen is essentially an array of charging hardware options that we've actually energized in our lab on the DCFCs over there on the left. And then we'll actually pull in vehicles, and we validate not only that the stations have the ability to communicate as OCPP, but they can initiate a charge and they comply with the use case that we're deploying to market. We validate the OCPP protocol to ensure that the use case can be met. What I mean by that, for instance, is for demand response. So the charging station could meet the basic requirements for OCPP compliance as related to initiating a charge and stopping a session, but we will run it through a battery of tests to ensure that it can also curtail load and take commands from our Sky solution to do so. The hardware portfolio we bring to market today may be different 6 months from now. Here is a depiction of some current suppliers that we bring to market. You'll notice that we have a variety of solutions that we can support between level 2, 7.2 kW, up to and including 350 kW for DCFC half hour charging. One of the things I want to note as we look at, our hardware portfolio is the custom branding that we can supply when we bring a piece of hardware to market for a customer. So Mid-American, as one of our larger utility customers, they have a custom branded solution for utility operate own program within their network. They are a Berkshire Hathaway owned utility and a long-standing partner of Shell Recharge Solutions. So we talked a little bit about how we validate equipment, what our current portfolio is. We're also constantly evaluating new pieces of equipment, new use cases. Myself, I come from a utility background, and this part of the industry, just to provide some context, is rapidly innovating, and that innovation requires us, Shell Recharge, to actually revalidate new hardware options that all the OEMs may be bringing to market. So we collaborate with those OEMs on a continuous basis. An example of that would be the new Tritium PKM model that they are bringing to market. The RTM model is being sunsetted, so there'll be a new platform, and we are actively validating that new piece of equipment within our lab in LA in order to ensure it works for customers that want to utilize that piece of hardware. And I'll touch briefly on O&M, things to be aware of, and then before passing it over to CJ. So SkyCare is our turnkey O&M solution. We developed this solution after being acquired by Shell. The solution is meant to guarantee uptime, not just of the network, but also of the hardware, the EVSC that would be deployed for electrification. And what we found and why we developed this solution was that, a lot of the OEMs are built to support, their warranties, and they replace parts, but what is not covered in those warranties is either the time to get parts. So if a part is covered under warranty and the charging station is not working, you could see lead times. I've seen lead times out to 40 weeks for some parts, depending on what it is. Even if it's not that long, 2-3 weeks to get a part could result in 2 to 3 weeks where the station's not operating. The way we execute this program is to leverage our SCIP platform and the asset management function and ticketing function of the solution to actively manage the station uptime. And so time is not covered within these standard and extended warranties, and also labor is not covered. So we actually cover labor. Certified technicians are routed to fix any issues that is discovered in the field. All of this is backed by detailed reporting and SLAs, service level agreements that we are contractually obligated to meet. And if the service does not perform as per the SLA percentage uptime, we actually refund our customers in compliance with the SLA, and all of that is termed in the contract. And so now I'm going to pause there and pass over to CJ. We want to get through this informational session and then open up to a broader discussion, providing at least 20 to 30 minutes for that. But I'll kick things over to CJ, and he'll run through budgetary costing and pricing considerations for any EV charging deployment.
Thanks, Robbie. Yeah, so I come from more of the engineering and construction side of the business. So I'll kind of talk to you all about some of the best practices that we've learned over the projects that we've done and things that can help you along your EV journey on installing EV charging infrastructure. Next slide. So there's a lot of things that can help save money with an electric vehicle infrastructure project. Some of them might seem a little bit obvious if you've done construction projects in the past, but some of you that are new or might not be in a role that manage engineering or construction on a daily basis, these will be very helpful as you start scoping out your first projects. So the first one is, obviously try to keep all of your site work to a minimum. Try to keep your EV charging in the area that is close to where the utility will likely provide you service and can easily provide you service. And then also have it so that you're only going to be tearing up a very small portion of your property. Try to trench through green spaces. It's always easier to have a trenching unit or a backhoe go through grass or gravel than it is through concrete asphalt. And also when you have to go patch that up on the back end, it's obviously, a little bit more of an eyesore when you can easily grow grass over an area that you've trenched through. In the industry, we like to call it an end zone style. So this is where you put the EVSE, the charger, right in front of the stall. So when a vehicle pulls in or backs in, it's just right in front. And that kind of allows all different types of vehicles to be able to charge regardless of where the charging port is located on the vehicle. So it helps to reduce rework on the back end, and also kind of gives you kind of a straight line of charging that you'll be in one trench that you'll be doing for all those different EVSEs. If possible, if your building or parking lot or wherever has capacity in the existing panel that was given by the utility, try to use that first. Putting in a new utility service with utility can take time. I do come also from a utility background. So, it is, essentially anytime you're going to kind of go over a couple level 2 chargers, you're probably going to have to do a new service with the utility. It's not impossible, but it does take time. So just kind of plan ahead there, have your building's electrician or hire a contractor to kind of get an idea of kind of how much space you do have for EV charging ahead of time. Number 5, it kind of does go both ways. We typically do use for at least all the Shell public charging, we use bollards for Shell HSSE health and safety standards. But if you do want to save some cost and the local jurisdiction does allow for it, you can use wheel stops in place of bollards, and that is a little bit easier to install and much cheaper. Also, just kind of, this is maybe a little bit geeky and nerdy, but if you have level 2 charging that is very far away from the source, you'll have what's called voltage drop. So that electrical pressure in the wire isn't enough to produce the amount of current that's being drawn by the vehicle. So you'll have to upsize the size of the conductor. You'll have to upsize the conduit, and that just increases cost. So always try to locate your charging as close as you can to the electrical source. And if you see these out in the wild, like Electrify America, Shell Recharge, EVgo, you'll always notice that their chargers are very close to where the utility transformer in electrical areas for the most part. Number 9, so kind of looking ahead of time, it can be 2 to 4 times more expensive to come in after the fact and retrofit an existing EV project than it is to kind of plan ahead in the beginning. You don't ever want to cut concrete twice. I haven't found a concrete eraser yet that works that isn't a saw. So you have to be very careful and always try to think ahead on, what your charging needs of the future are going to be to put in some conduit, upsize your gear, work with the utility to use a transformer pad that can accommodate a larger transformer in their future. All those things will help save a lot of headaches and a lot of costs down the line. Go next slide. And we talked about cost savings before, and we'll talk a little bit about the cost drivers. So, extensive site work. I've seen some initial layouts, and I'll show you a couple in the next few slides that, you'll say, oh yeah, we'll just trench from here to here. That's no problem. We'll put some charging here. We'll put some charging over here because I have some customers that want that. I want to save this premium parking. And it ends up being that you'll have to close down half the site for a couple days. You'll have to work at night, and all these things kind of increase cost and kind of increase the site disturbance. So, try to be as thoughtful as you can when you're placing that charging and you're kind of seeing where those will go. Always do try to trench across areas that you're okay with if it's going to be patched after the fact. I know we've worked with some customers that have just put in a brand new gas station and they want to put in EV charging. They've already paved it, and we have to tell them that we're gonna have to cut, we're gonna have to trench up their brand new asphalt or concrete, and it's always, that's never a great conversation. So, try to, we'll get creative. We'll try to come up with ways that minimize site impact, but sometimes there's only so much that you can do. For DC fast charging especially, one of the biggest cost drivers is just how much electricity they do draw. You do require some very large service sizes, and especially in some more of the rural areas with cooperatives especially, they won't allow services over, sometimes 1,500 to 2,000 amps without primary metered service, which right now, Robbie was talking about lead times for just charging parts for medium voltage gear. That's 65 weeks right now. So, try to be thoughtful when it comes to the higher power charging and what you're going to do today and what you're going to plan for in the future, and kind of work with your utility early on kind of what they'll be able to provide at certain locations. Sometimes when you're putting in your initial load requests, you might not know that there's a data center going in down the street or a Bitcoin mining facility, what have you, that might actually already have the capacity overloaded on that feeder. So you might not actually have the capacity without a major upgrade. So there's all those things that working with your utility early, especially on these larger projects, will save you a lot of headaches down the road. Go to the next slide and we'll show a general layout. So, I've probably done thousands of these. We do these a lot for our customers, and kind of the initial like, hey, here's what we're thinking. Here's what we're trying to do to save you a bit of money and achieve your goals. So this was a customer, this was a fueling station in Kentucky or Tennessee, and they were looking to put in some 350 kW DC fast charging and some 180 kW DC fast charging. So we looked at the site. We didn't walk this one, but talking to the local, it was a TVA local distribution utility, and we kind of worked with them a little bit, and we kind of found out that they would likely be extending their primary across the street overhead. So we tried to site all of our gear in that area, understanding that there are setbacks and other things that we have to be aware of. But that, helps to reduce the utility costs, helps to reduce the overall site impact compared to if we put the utility transformer a little bit north on this page, and trying to have all the charging as much as possible in one central area. We do a ton of these. We help a lot of our customers through this journey. This is kind of like the first step. And then from here goes into more formal engineering with site surveys to figure out what the underground utilities are, easements, conflicts, things like that will come up, and we'll have to end up working around and optimizing as we get further and further down the engineering and design process. Then lastly, we'll kind of show just like a very fancy one. So in some cases, we'll do some more higher end renderings. Sometimes jurisdictions require us to put these together, especially when we have canopies. But this is an example of a site that we did that started as that kind of very generic PowerPoint layout that then evolves into something like this, and then eventually gets put into AutoCAD and designed and submitted to a jurisdiction. I think, yep, that's it. Robbie, I'll turn it back to you and we'll have our conversation.
Yeah, so we hope that was informative, you know, in talking with the Virginia Clean Cities folks. Our goal here was to also leave adequate time. I think me and CJ are almost spot on for what we wanted. We're 3 minutes short. I gotta say we're on point there. So we want to open it up to you guys for open discussion, see if there's any questions we can answer around, you know, best practices, solutions in the market, or the customers we support, or our abilities. So I'll kind of, I guess I can, Sarah, if you want to drive we want to raise hands, or you want to take the questions, however y'all want to do it.
Yeah, if people want to raise hands, and then I can call on you guys to unmute yourselves. Also, if you don't want to speak up or your mic's not working, please feel free to put them in the chat as well. As you guys get prepared with your questions, I think the first thing I will do is I will bring up a question that is actually put in the chat that I think is a good one, and will be good to share it with everyone. So this was from Cassandra Fishinger from Shenandoah Valley Electric Cooperative, and they asked, is the communication from the EV charger to the OCPP over cell network, or is a fiber connection required?
So yeah, and CJ gave the long and short of it, which is, you know, 99% of customers today use that cellular connection. Now, I know there's a lot of rural fiber programs going on. I know I'm very familiar with Shen Valley's territory. I used to go up there twice a month in a previous life to meet with some folks at your organization. What we can do for more robust communications, if there's like dark fiber that you own and you want to own, operate a station, is just specify an Ethernet fiber type of connection into the scope development, so that you avoid that point of failure, which related to the cellular modem communications. A lot of times what drives uptime or poor uptime can be a loss of that connection. Now, the loss of cellular connection does not mean necessarily that the drivers cannot charge. It means that you're not communicating with the charging station. So with that being said, in some scenarios, we don't know, we can't sense a connection. Our system listens for a heartbeat every 15 minutes and takes ad hoc alarms and things, is always listening. So if we don't get a heartbeat, we may classify the status as unknown for that station because we didn't get a communication point from the cellular modem. Then when we reestablish communication, it comes back on as live. But if a driver was in that area and they wanted to utilize the station, even though we've lost connectivity, it doesn't necessarily mean the charge won't perform.
So how does the charger initialize then if it's lost connection and the driver pulls up to it and they've got to identify themselves to kind of get it to work? Does it have something locally on it as well?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, and I'm sure CJ has something to add. So you customize what you want to have happen within our solution. So if your utility own operate and your main goal is to enable electrification, and since you're supplying power, you know you're getting some sort of remediation for that charge anyway, you can set it so it defaults to free VIN mode in the field. It's kind of a scope development process. If you don't want it to work, if you can establish a connection, when the user tries to authorize a charge, that's another option. I don't know, CJ, if in your experience you've touched on that in more detail.
Yeah, usually on the front end, when we do an initial site assessment, we'll have cell readings taken for all the major carriers at the location. You know, you can sometimes see a Verizon tower in the distance, but you're still, you know, your signal just based on trees, a building, other things is just very poor, and you have to go with AT&T or another one. In some cases for commercial ones, so for like fleets where uptime's, you know, critical, we'll actually go with a third-party commercial communications solutions. So that's like a separate commercial grade modem that's a lot more high power that kind of eliminates some of those issues. And we have seen that come in on the public charging side too. But it does happen. You usually see that on a lot of the older stations, but a lot of the newer ones, we're starting to kind of get ahead on that in the design phase and try to mitigate those issues before a driver even gets there.
Cool, thank you all.
Question, a popular topic of discussion, actually.
Yeah, thank you for those very thorough answers. Really appreciate it. There is another question that we have in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and read out the questions in the chat, just so since we're recording this, if people view it on YouTube later or something like that, they can hear the full question. So this question is from Dave Gelman with VEIC. When you do a full turnkey, do you also get involved in rate design / selection with the supplying utility, in particular demand charges? In other words, do you ever get to negotiate any of this on behalf of the site owner or site owners?
Robbie, I can take this.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I'll add
Yeah.
anything if I have.
So in a turnkey application, we will work with the customer on what rate options are available. Some in some areas they're like low, like demand poor rates. So like, you know, they're initially designed for like agricultural pumping loads, things like that. In some cases, they just have direct like EV charging rates that are more energy focused and less heavy on demand. And we will point those to the customer and says, you know, hey, this is what you should be signing up for. This is, you know, the way to kind of, you know, save the most money. For utility programs, I know our policy team has worked with utilities on kind of the overall, you know, hey, here's what some other utilities are doing when it comes to rate design in these certain areas. It is definitely a tough nut to crack. When I was at the utility, I would meet with our rate making people all the time, trying to figure out how to create a non cost shifting EV rate. It's very challenging, but we do work with them on that. When it comes to negotiating for site host for a different rate, that usually only happens in like open markets. So think of like ERCOT, PJM, mid-continent areas like that do have that. Typically, it's just looking through the menu of options that the utility does have available to them and seeing what makes the most sense. Sometimes they'll allow us, so, you know, maybe there's like a commercial, you know, medium tariff that we technically fall into because we hit a certain demand peak, but we can say, hey, can we just stay on the small, you know, the commercial small rate because it's got a less punitive demand charge. So we will work with our customers on that.
And that's part of the solution within our Sky platform includes, we have a demand response module. So if demand charges are a concern, you have vehicles that are domiciled overnight and you want to have them charged and ready to go in the morning in like a fleet charging scenario, we can actually curtail the load associated with those EV chargers from say 4 to 7, right? So when you're at peak demand, you're not seeing demand charges. Another application for that, just as a point of reference, is we also work with large fleets to programmatically electrify their entire over-the-road vehicle asset base. And sometimes we apply the curtailment solution to comply with battery warranties. So they may put in like a 180 kW charger, but the batteries won't take more than 50. But they put that in to future-proof the site. We can help on that side of things too, if we understand the use case as related to, you know, the load that the chargers be associated with.
Awesome.
You're right about that, David.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I did briefly see someone unmute. So if that was you and you want to, and you were unmuting to ask a question, please feel free. I'll give you a pause for a second. All right, and with that pause, since I didn't hear anyone, I'll field the next question in the chat. So this is from Robert Fernat. Since there is connectivity to each site, is real-time charger availability shown if it's desired by the customer on the app and or made available to the vehicle navigation systems via an API or other apps? Also, do you guys have any experience using ESS with the Shell recharge stations?
So just to address the first part, an integration with vehicle navigation systems. Right now, we're actually going into a development sprint to enhance our fleet module. Part of that enhancement involves API integration with GeoTab, to where we will have the capability to track vehicle location, the battery status, and then as far as the station availability, there's several ways you can get that. One's through our backend system, the SCIP platform, where you would leverage the asset management or insights tools, which are just modules within our software that'll tell you, give you a dashboard of all the available stations, usage, that sort of things. You can also go, there's public sites like PlugShare that show this information, as well as our front-end user app that the drivers would use. So the way you go about getting that information really depends upon, who's looking for it in a lot of cases. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, CJ. I'm not real keen on what ESS is referring to as the last question.
Is that energy storage? When they mean ESS, is that energy storage?
Yeah, is that battery energy storage, like a DER integration? Robert?
Yes, that was what I was referring to.
Yeah, so actually that's, I'm actually working on a use case right now to integrate a flywheel technology like we would a battery energy storage system. That's executed in a variety of ways, but we do have proprietary site controller that could tie in battery energy storage systems and DERs into the charging stations to perform peak shaving functions. Our proprietary site controller has a variety of functions, but one of them is a Modbus to OCPP translator, whereby we can actually operate the battery storage system and inject voltage. So you deliver 180 kW, perhaps at the port, but you're not pulling that much off of the grid. A more advanced use case that we have deployed in Europe along that same vein is to actually monitor the site load. So not just the charging load, but the load at the site, and leveraging the batteries to actually lower the power consumption at the site as a whole, in addition to peak shaving. Anything else? Have you worked more on the battery storage side at all, CJ, with any of your projects?
No. It does come up from time to time, but I think we've just done those handful of integrations, but we do have the capability if customers do want to go down that path.
And typically what we see is customers are really interested until they see the cost.
Yeah.
And they rethink their design a little bit.
Understood. Thanks.
Yep.
And then we have another question that was submitted to me, and it's sort of a two-parter, but I think the second part helps explain what the first part is. So could you speak a little bit more to Shell Recharge Solutions business model? And then about that, how do you guys plan on interacting with existing Shell fueling stations?
Sure. So we actually, Shell as a broader organization has some Shell operate own functionalities. That's the stuff that CJ has more familiarity with. Shell Recharge Solutions, formerly Greenlots, our go-to-market strategy is to provide the hardware, software, and services to enable our customers, utilities, and other large OEMs to execute on their electrification goals. And so what that means is we allow the customer to take full ownership. So we don't monetize the asset. The customer does that. We don't set pricing. The customer does that. We don't monetize the transactions. We provide the software and the solution, and it's often customer branded in the field to enable our customer to do that. Something else, another way as part of Shell that we can structure these agreements would be our charging as a service solution for large scale deployments. So you can avoid large capital outlays at the front end. You essentially amortize your project, the hardware, the software, everything over a certain time, say 5 or 10 years. So you pay for that as a service. And then I'd mentioned before, we have those OEM relationships with folks like Ford and Penske. That's another, we have an entire group that's focused exclusively on the OEM market. So an example of that, and this is a public article, we are the backend system for the Ford Pass solution. So we actually can expose our APIs to customers for them to build their own app and leverage our roaming capabilities across the United States.
And then,
Thank you very much. You have more to say, CJ?
oh, I was going to add, so I would say majority of my time right now is spent on delivering Shell's public charging network throughout the country. So right now we're working with all of the different wholesalers throughout all of the US and Canada to put in DC fast charging at the Shell stations. I don't think we have any in Virginia yet. Mainly the Northeast, Texas, California, states like that, where we're putting in, I think this year our goal is 297 ports. Next year is like in the 900s, and it exponentially grows from there. So you will likely see in Virginia, not too sure a time, a Shell recharge station at your local fueling station.
And I'll add to that a lot of this, these deployments are driven by the regulatory environment, and our policy team focuses on, the funds available to our customers and to us to deploy these stations. So for instance, like in North Carolina, they're deploying funds right now for DCFC corridor, where the state of North Carolina will actually fund up to 80%. There's a certain dollar amount per port using federal dollars to enable electrification. And that's where we see a lot more activity from both Shell owning, operating, and our customers submitting for those funds.
That also leads into a question that we had submitted by someone who was unable to attend today. They were asking specifically if you guys had any projects that had been installed in Virginia. So you did already sort of touch on that, but they were specifically interested in like forward planning, if there were any corridors in Virginia that would be primary targets for you guys. And they were specifically interested in the US 460 corridor. If you guys have any information on that.
So I don't think this, and Robbie, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure if the VW money has been released in the state of Virginia for DC fast charging corridors.
So there was some funds available some time ago. We were not successful within that award. I think it was awarded to another competitor, but then there's other funding that's becoming available. And obviously Alan and the Clean Cities group are very in tune with this, but a lot of it is coming through the DOT. So there's a couple of things about this federal funding and NEVI funding. First of all, it's not fully scoped out yet. The federal government is actually getting feedback from OEMs, suppliers like ourselves, on how to deploy the $7.5 billion that they want to utilize to electrify the interstate corridors across the US. So $5 billion of that will actually be deployed directly to the states. And I believe it's based on the tax revenues for that and the highway system of the state and the population. So that $5 billion will flow into the states, will be deployed by the DOT. And then there's $2.5 billion that will be deployed across the US through a grant program. That grant program, like for instance, on some of the ones we work on, the state will identify locations where they want the corridor to go, and then site hosts will submit projects to realize those funds and deploy the stations in that area. I hope that answers the question. I'm not aware of an active corridor project in Virginia that isn't already spoken for, put it that way.
Yeah. I think that was a very good and very thorough answer for where we're at right now. I think from the Virginia Clean City side, we are seeing exactly what you're saying. So excellent. And I think those are all the questions that I had submitted. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute, put them in the chat. We still have about 10 minutes.
Yeah, and if something comes up that y'all think of later, like happens to us all when we're walking our dog or something, darn, I wish we would have said that. You'll have my contact information and CJ's on this invite. We're happy to just provide any information that would be helpful as you think about electrification in your EV journey. So yeah, if there's nothing else, this, was a lot of fun for us. We appreciate the ability to participate, Sarah, and there was a lot of good communication back and forth. We always like it when we do get questions because it's sometimes we don't get as much participation. So we appreciate that from the group, certainly.
Yeah, and as you said, I just posted Robbie's contact information and my contact information in the chat. Feel free to reach out to Robbie if you guys have any specific questions, and he can either answer them or direct you to the right people. And then if you guys have any questions about the Virginia Clean City side or these tech happy hour functions, please reach out to me about those. Thank you, CJ and Robbie, for your great presentation and your really thorough answers to all of the questions. We really appreciate getting to hear a little bit more in depth than what your general slides would be. So I think it's been a really great experience. I'm going to plug our next Tech Happy Hour event that will be taking place on May 19th at 4 p.m. Eastern, and that will be with Cummins. They will be speaking about natural gas this time, so a little bit of a pivot from our EV crowd, but still supporting the future.